Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our Van Gogh sunflowers. We have Michael here working the cameras.
Hello.
And the theme of this month is called Let's Make Art History Volume 3. And this is where we take famous paintings and artists and recreate them and learn about them. And it is probably one of my favorite themes to do because I just love art history, and it's really fun. It's just a great time. So for this project, we will be doing it in 6 steps. So our very first step is we will be doing the background and the vase. Oh, sorry, just the background. Second step is vase. Third step, we're gonna do the flowers. Fourth step, we will do the stems and the leaves. Fifth step, we'll go back and add some details and textures onto our flowers. And our 7th step is going in with our turquoise Neocolor and doing some blue sections. The paint colors that I'm using for this project are lemon yellow, red, space blue, and sea blue. And I also have my bonus items ready to go. And this is our Neocolors, Karen Dash Neocolors. We have orange and blue turquoise. Turquoise blue.
All right.
Sorry.
Malfunction.
Okay, so I'm gonna raise my right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I have some art history books here that we will look through, but I figured we can maybe use our drawing time to look at the art history things instead of like separate. So we'll be coming in and out with fun information. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting in my background. And what you want to do is whenever you have a larger area to cover, you want to use a larger brush. So you can use your 1-inch wash, you can use your round 12, whatever you want to use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the top half. I'm going to take lemon yellow, pull it off to the side, and grab a tiny bit of red, just because this lemon yellow is very like bright, and I just want to tone it down just a little bit. But the bottom is like more orange, so I don't want it to be like straight orange. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then water it down a bit, and then go ahead and just put it in. And you can be loose and expressive with your brush strokes when it comes to putting this stuff in. And that's because Van Gogh, and we have done one of his projects before. We have done Starry Night before, so if you want to give that a go, you can find it on our YouTube channel.
Do you mean give it a Van Gogh?
Yes. Which is one of my favorite projects that we have done and was really fun. And Van Gogh is considered a post-impressionist painter. Now, if you have taken or have done the Monet class, that is Impressionism. So I go over the details of Impressionism and how that came about in that class. And this is defined as post-impressionism, which was essentially the movement right after Impressionism. It kind of created a new one. What's funny is if you look through art history, like one movement just like is a reaction to the next movement, which is a reaction to the next movement. It's like a chain event. And I also feel like that's so true in life, because as someone who has tried solving business problems, I have found that one solution is literally just creating a new problem in and of itself. You just don't know it yet. And it just goes round and round. Now, post-impressionism is defined in terms of, there are some similar qualities of impressionism, which is like loose and bold brushstroke, where you can see it not really mixing as much color, but instead just layering it on top of each other. But the big difference is that post-impressionism really focuses on, I would say, like being a little bit more bold with color. Because with Impressionism, they were really trying to capture the light as it was happening right then, and was really all about like capturing the movement and getting an impression of that movement and being there, like this plain air, you're in the moment, let's paint it as quick as we can essentially and capture what's happening. Where with Post-Impressionism, it wasn't necessarily about, being outside and painting right in that moment. And it wasn't about like using subtle, like natural colors. Instead, they were really expressive and bold with their colors and their color choices. And we can see that here in this painting, right? I mean, the fact that this entire painting is made up, it's yellow. It's yellow flowers in a yellow vase on a yellow table with a yellow background. Like,
Wow.
that is nuts. Would you ever consider doing that color combination when you were painting a still life? There's no way. Um, so I'm going in with my round 12 and I'm kind of just making my way around. Now, if you do overlap on your petals, that's not a big deal because they're yellow and we will just layer on top of them. And it's actually not a big deal if you also do it on the green because green layers on top of yellow beautifully. There are a lot of lines and marks here, so it's easy to get a little bit lost and confused, but I don't want you to feel frustrated. So always like be kind to yourself when you're painting, especially when you're doing like a Van Gogh painting, because this is expressive and loose and a little bit more bold. Okay, and I'm kind of just using my reference photo here as my guide of like, okay, where does this end? Where does this start? That kind of thing. Okay, that feels good. And then just for fun, because I have like some darker yellows like right here, let's put some up at the top. All right, and then immediately I'm going to go and do my table, which is more of an orangey color. So that same yellow, but let's just mix a bit more red in there. And let's do a bit more yellow. Basically, I want it to be a little bit darker than the yellow that I have in my background. Oh, that feels a bit better. And if the orange just gets too bright, and this is true for any color, if one color gets too bright and you're like, ugh, I want like the darkness of the color, but I don't want the vibrancy of the color, then if you add that color's complement, it will neutralize that color. So the complement of orange is blue. And actually, one of the last steps we do is we go back and do like a loose blue sketch-like texture on top of the table, which is going to kind of tone down the brightness of the orange. Now, using that same orange mixture, I'm going to paint the top of the vase. So I'm still using my round 12. But if you want to move to your 6, because it's a bit of a smaller area, feel free. Know that with round brushes, you can always use the tip of it to get like a more detailed stroke.
During this movement period, post-impressionism,
Yeah.
were there like multiple famous artists in it, or is like Van Gogh the guy?
So there are multiple. I actually wrote it down. There.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm like, did you look at my notes? How did you know to ask me that? So other famous post-impressionisms, I would say Van Gogh is the most famous. I mean, Van Gogh is probably the most prolific painter that like everyone knows who Van Gogh is pretty much, which is actually so sad because he did not experience success in his while he was alive, like at all. But Cezanne, and I might be saying these wrong, so I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing them right. I should have practiced. Seurat is another one, and Gauguin is another one.
Gogh.
Gauguin? Oh, gosh, I was going to practice that, and I didn't. So those were the ones, and I'm sure there were others. And what's tricky about like art history and art history movements is that they're not super far away. So like essentially impressionism was like 30 to 40 years, and then right after was post-impressionism, and you have artists that blur these lines back and forth, right? So originally, I mean, Van Gogh is Dutch, and he learned the traditional Dutch way of painting, which is more realistic. And while we let this dry, let me show you some self-portraits that he did. So
We went to his, it was like a Van Gogh show where they played music and did big projections of his art. It was
yes,
incredible.
it was incredible. I thought I bookmarked it, but okay. So he's done so many self-portraits. And that's a lot because you always have a model if you do self portraits. And he unfortunately didn't have the finances to hire models a lot of the time. So he's painting himself. And as you can see in this top left here, this is kind of more the traditional way he learned, which is like the more Dutch traditional way. And then he went to France and he was inspired by Impressionism.
Can you
And
bring those over the uptight cam, please?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was one of his first, well, I don't want to say one of his first because he's been doing it. This was in 1886. So there's that one. This was also in 1886. And I can feel like that's a huge shift in style between these two,
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
And then even here, here, and then look at this one. And this one is definitely more post-impressionism, or I would say that feels more impressionism to me. So all of that is to say, like, artists can jump back and forth between styles and movements because these timelines that we're talking about aren't these extensive things. Also, an artist's journey, their style is constantly evolving and changing. They're known for some very specific things, but in general, if you look at their full body and breadth of work, it is, like here and there and there, and you can see that they're pulling from these things that they're learning from and these other artists and these contemporary artists and applying that to their own art, which is so important for us to know because I think as we're starting out, we have this assumption that, the goal as an artist is to find your own style. And once you find your own style, you made it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're an artist now. Finding your own style is very tricky and hard to do and takes a lot of time. And once you find your style, it is a journey. It changes from there. So I don't want you to feel like you guys have to like stay within this box that you create for yourselves. Okay, so we're gonna do the bottom of the vase really quick. So I'm gonna take that same orange mixture and just add a ton of water to it so it's like a barely there color. Maybe even a little bit more. So we want it to be even lighter than the background. Okay, that's it. And now we are going to move to step 3, and we are going to do our flowers. So I'm gonna start with the brown. No. I'm gonna start with the green part of the flowers, and we'll move to the brown. And then we'll do the petals. So to mix brown, you're gonna mix orange, so red and yellow, and then you're gonna add blue to that. Let's add space blue. And voila, we have brown. Okay, and I'm just gonna take my round 12 and following, we're mixing green, sorry. Let's mix green first.
It's a great brown though.
Thank you, we'll use that in a minute. Take yellow, take a little bit of sea blue or space blue, depending on how like vibrant. Okay, so I'm gonna take this yellow and sea blue and mix a green, and it's kind of like this light lemon yellow green. And I'm gonna start just putting in the centers. And whenever you want a little bit more yellow in there, you can just add more yellow, just right on top. Okay, that's it. Now we're gonna do our brown.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake. Okay, so you wanna know some fun facts about these sunflowers?
Yes.
Okay, so fun fact number 1 is Van Gogh wanted to be known as the painter of sunflowers. Like he loves sunflowers.
Really? That was his thing?
Yes, it was his thing. Like everyone knew that he was obsessed with sunflowers. And even when he passed away, his friends and his family brought sunflowers to his funeral for him because they just knew how much he loved them. And he just wanted to be known by them.
I think most people know Van Gogh as having tragic, debilitating mental illness.
Yeah.
Was that lifelong, do you know? Or was that just later in life? Is that something you know?
For when I was reading through the book, I mean, gosh, it's hard. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. So I don't want to speak to that without knowing. It didn't seem like it was lifelong. I think it was more towards the middle and end, but I'm not positive. I do know that he was very close to his brother Theo. And and actually they passed away within a year of each other. Van Gogh passed, and his brother was really heartbroken. He passed the next year.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
I know. Um, and so much of what, like, Theo worked in the art world and would actually send Van Gogh money whenever he could, because he really lived in, he was pretty destitute. And the other kind of sad, more sombering thing about Van Gogh is he had a brother that was born before him, that was a stillborn birth. And that baby's name was Vincent. And the baby passed. And so I think I might be speaking out of turn, but I think it was pretty common in that day for, like, if you named a baby and they passed, you named the next one that name. I've heard that before. I'm not sure how accurate that is. But he thinks that's also why he kind of like had a hard time in his childhood, because he always just had this guilt um, that he survived while his baby brother didn't, and they share the same name.
Wow.
Sad, right?
Ugh. Yeah, very sad.
Okay. So I'm kind of just like loosely painting in the brown again. I mean, like, play with it, have fun with it too. It doesn't have to be too particular. Okay, so we added the browns, and now we can start adding the petals here. So you can use your Neocolor as a way to, like, start. You can do it later. You can do it in the middle. All of this kind of stuff. So Neocolors are basically like a crayon that can blend out with water. So they're just kind of fun. They create really cool textures, and I love introducing new ways that you can add texture to your painting, especially when we're focusing on something like Impressionism or Post-Impressionism, because they're known for their brushstrokes and their layering of the paint. And so I want you to think about, yes, we can layer in watercolor, but it tends to blend. So really utilize these Neocolors as a chance to add some really fun texture to your painting. So I can just go through and just kind of follow the outlines of the petals using this Neocolor. You can even dip it if you want. Dip it into the water and then apply it. And what's that going to do is it's going to make it super smooth, almost like painting with lipstick.
What are they made out of? Are they chalky?
No,
They waxy like
they're
a crayon?
wax. They're wax like a crayon. So you can see the difference, like how thick and smooth that line is when it's wet as compared to when it's dry. So, like, play with that. And we'll go back in with paint too as well. And you don't have to do it on every single flower. Like, maybe there's some where you're like, oh yeah, I'll do it here or not.
You and I saw Starry Night in real life,
We did.
and my memory of that, I mean, it was beautiful. It was smaller than I thought, one. And two, the paint on it is so thick.
Yes.
It is just layered on. Like you obviously can't touch it.
Yes.
But if you could, I imagine it would go like brrrr, like you would like rub your
Yes,
fingers
yes.
on it.
Okay, so I put some orange down, and I'm gonna grab a little bit of yellow and grab a tiny bit of brown just to kind of desaturate this color a bit. And then I'm just going to blend out some of these petals and just kind of mixing it together. But by introducing yellow to this, it doesn't make it just bright orange. Does that make sense? We kind of want it to be like kind of mustardy kind of color. So I'm using my round 6. And again, I'm being a little bit more loose. When we saw Starry Night, I mean, it was beautiful. There was a huge crowd around it, which is understandable. It's one of the most famous paintings of our life. But I actually went to a different level, and I got to see some of Van Gogh's florals. It wasn't the sunflowers. I believe they were irises. Not like the iris painting, because that iris painting sold for $53 million, if you
Wow.
can even believe it. but some other of his florals, and they were like, that took my breath away. They were just stunning. The use of color, the texture and the movement, how bold they were. I mean, it was just so beautiful.
Why don't you think he was appreciated in his time? The style was too different?
I think the style was too different, and I don't know. Sometimes I think the art world historically was kind of like this club.
Mm.
You had to be one of the cool kids. Um, I don't know. That's just my vibe. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's how I feel sometimes when I'm reading about it. Yeah, I just think it was a little bit too different. It did go on and create a whole other movement, especially in Germany, like what he created. And obviously, it has affected. Um, I mean, we're painting it right now. Like, this was a big moment
Yeah.
within art history, but during the time, it just wasn't seen that way. But I think that's how history is in general. You really, like, you have the privilege of hindsight. And so you can look at these things and say, this. But when you're in it, when you're living it, I mean, life is so complicated and layered. And I think that's why I also love art history so much, is we think about these great artists and famous paintings, and we think that it was some magical time where they knew that they were creating history and they knew that they were doing this. But they didn't. They were waking up and just working and had the same stresses and the same issues that we experience in our everyday life. That was their reality as well. It's just that when things are put in hindsight within a timeline of history, it's easy to make it black and white, but the reality is it's just layers of gray, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now what we are going to do, I did most of the petals here. As you can see, they're like loose, and I really like just let my brush work do so much of the work here, creating those lines and those movements. And we can start adding leaves. So I still have some green mixed on my palette from when I did the center. I'm going to actually mix a little bit darker green. So let's introduce some space blue to this yellow. And I'm going to start putting in stems and leaves. So just try and like follow your outline. If you lost, like I can see here, I've lost some of my shape and my color and stuff like that. That's okay. Okay, interesting fact number 2 about this sunflower painting is he did 5 versions of it. He loves sunflowers. So we're doing one of the versions of it, but I want to show you really quick this version of it where it's a turquoise background. I mean, look at that.
Go as close to the table as possible. There you go. So it's in focus. Beautiful.
Isn't that just so gorgeous? So if you wanted to take, like, if you wanted to do this again, 5 versions, then if you wanted to just use your turquoise Neocolor for the background, like, go for it. And I don't know if they can see that detail, but there's brush strokes. Like, can you see that brush stroke on that close-up camera? All of the texture that's happening there. So this is one of the versions. The version we're painting is this one right here. Right there. So he did many versions, um, which is fun.
It is funny that you mentioned it because now I'm thinking about it, doing a yellow background, yellow table, yellow flower. That is funny,
Yeah.
but it works.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take this green and just kind of finish putting in the leaves. And if you want even a darker green, like a browner green, if you add red into your green mixture, that's going to desaturate the green and make it a little bit of a darker value. So I'm kind of just looking at my reference photo, trying to follow different marks. And then I really hope that you guys take the time to look at these paintings that we're recreating, like look them up online. Um, I was flipping through these art history books preparing for this lesson to make sure I'm teaching you guys the right thing. And I mean, like, if you are ever in need of finding inspiration, go to your local library, grab a few art books from like the masters. I mean, whoever you want, it could be anybody really, and just like look through them because there's just so much there. There's so much there. And it's so much like it's easy to look at Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook for ideas and just like consume, and never actually paint. But I think that when you take the time to look at like famous artists and their works, I don't know, it just made me want to pick up a brush, like actually paint. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that is looking good. And then what we are going to do is we are going to look at kind of tightening all this up. As you can see, I have a lot of like white spaces in between here, either where I forgot to fill in the background or I didn't do like the yellow section. So let's go ahead and just kind of fill those and tighten those up. And I'm going to mix a darker brown. So let's take yellow and red and a little bit of C. More red because that turned out really green. There we go. Okay, so when it comes to the brown part on these sunflowers, I'm going to use my 6 or whatever brush you want to use. And we're going to start adding like interesting textures. So I'm going to outline it using a darker brown. And then I'm also going to take my brush and hit it on my paper towel so it absorbs the extra paint and do a dry brush texture on top of the brown part. And this is trying to kind of recreate that really fuzzy, crazy brushstroke texture that he had on the sunflowers. But if there's like another way that you want to explore, like applying this texture to the painting, then go for it.
This might make me sound very silly, but he only painted in oil, right? Is that pretty much whatever all painters painted with in the old days?
Oil, I think, is definitely the most popular medium when it comes to like art history. Although um, there's they always experimented too. I don't want to say they always, depending on the artist, but usually there's experimentation with different materials. And a lot of the times they would use other materials for like the initial sketches and ideas for their painting. So actually, I wanted to show you this because I just thought it was stunning. So one of the things that Van Gogh is really known for is his layer of brushstroke, right? Like all of that texture. But he did this drawing that he was sending to his brother to see if his brother liked it before he submitted it for an art show. And sorry, I had it bookmarked.
You just showed it to me, I think.
Here we go. So this is black chalk and red and brown pencil. And like, look at the sheer amount of movement in this drawing.
Yeah, wow.
And what I love about it so much is one, I can recognize Van Gogh's style. Look at his lines, his movement, his strokes. The fact that he is able to create so much movement with pencils is amazing. And it shows you the power of line, the power of, we can tell that it starts here and then it kind of expands and waves out with a little bit of movement. We can tell that this is the foreground because the brushstrokes are bigger or the marks are bigger. We can tell that the sun is strong and warm because he did this kind of radiating circles around it. And it really, like, this is such a good example of post-impressionism without the color because it shows you how they used brushstroke to maybe communicate a feeling without it being correct. We don't necessarily see radiating rings around the sun, but we know that feeling of the warmth of the layers of sun when it's really strong. And this is how it's communicated on a paper. So it's just beautiful. I mean, I looked at that and I was just like, what? That is amazing. And so for you guys, if you ever wanted to try maybe you're not sure if you like your brushstroke or you want to practice it, what would happen if you'd used a different material besides watercolor? How can you communicate depth and line and movement of something with just a piece of chalk? As you can see here, it's totally possible. It's an excellent exercise, and it's just, ugh, powerful and stunning, and I love it.
I can't believe how good my questions are. I'm leading to all your bookmark things
Wow.
on accident. I want the world to know we are not in league
Seriously.
together.
We didn't talk about this at all. Okay, so I'm going to just keep going with my rough brush texture. Now, remember, if you're feeling a little bit brave or edgy, if you want to throw in a little bit of red in your brown or green or, whatever, go for it.
I want someone to get romantic about flycatchers, Venus flytraps, as Van Gogh was about sunflowers.
Oh, yeah.
I want hundreds of paintings, 5 versions of the same one.
I think in general, Van Gogh really loved nature. I read that he was also really into nests.
Like bird nests?
Yeah, he liked nests. Okay, so now I'm going to go back with my yellow and let's put in some more petals. So sorry, my brain's spaced. Now, if you want to start outlining some of the petals too using like a brown or a dark yellow mixture, go for it. Maybe your Neocolor. Explore. Explore, explore, explore. And we're just going to start kind of filling in any white gaps or areas that we have. Now, the third fun fact about the sunflower paintings, and I'm sure you can guess this by now. I mean, he did 5 versions, but these were color experiments. We can see that through the different versions. And also, if we look at his still lifes, when he first started, they were kind of more that dark, traditional colors, a little bit more Dutch influenced. And I actually have some examples. Should I show them?
Heck yeah. You got to wonder how different this would have been modern day, because he would have just had Photoshop and just been like, bloop, blue background.
Yes.
Bloop,
yes,
pink
that's
background.
right. Oh, I don't think I marked it. Give me a second. It's okay. I can just describe it, but essentially his first still life with flowers. And still lives at that time were really popular, especially of flowers. So like artists sometimes would paint things that they're like, well, hopefully this sells because I got to like make a living. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So originally his floral still lifes were like really dark backgrounds, deep reds, like pinks, that kind of more traditional, like fine art, realistic style, classic, classicism kind of style. And then he was introduced to Impressionism. And you can see his colors and his flowers getting a little bit more brighter, a little bit more bold. And then it eventually led to where he ended up with the irises and the sunflowers. And I mean, just really beautiful. And whenever there's a white space and you're not really sure what's happening, just add a petal. It's fine. I'm going to use some more brown within my petals here. Kind of outlining some. Now the fourth, and actually, Michael, I'm going to have you look this up for me. So the artist, Gogh, can you look up how to pronounce that? Because I have to say his name a few times. It's Gauguin. Gauguin.
I typed GAU and it came up that word pronunciation.
I think that's the hard thing with reading is you only see the words. You never like hear how it's.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Gauguin.
Gauguin. Okay, I wasn't too far off. So there was a time that Gauguin came to study with Van Gogh. And that's another really fun thing that I love to read about with art history is how these artists were essentially like in it together. They created these groups where if they had similar styles and would learn from each other. And it wasn't, I mean, you're going to find exceptions, but it wasn't necessarily about competition and being the best. It was just about how can we make better art? And how can we learn from each other? And how can we develop a relationship of trust? So then when I critique you, you listen, that kind of thing. And so Gauguin was coming to stay with Van Gogh. And Van Gogh decorated his entire room in sunflower paintings. And actually, there is a portrait that Gauguin did of Van Gogh, of him sitting and painting this sunflower painting, which is wild. It feels like meta.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Someone should paint him painting Van Gogh.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So we are kind of tightening things up here. We're near the end of our project. And I'm going to go in with dark green, and I can add a little bit of shadow on the center of some of these. And the last step that we are going to do is we are going to use our turquoise Neocolor for that finishing element on some of our flowers and paintings. So actually, before I do that, I want to do a dark brown line on the vase and the table. It's just really quick. Grab around 6, mix a dark brown. We're just going to go ahead and kind of follow the imperfect shape of this vase. And so next time you guys get down on yourself for a wonky vase or a wonky petal or a wonky table, like
Van Gogh did it.
Van Gogh did it. If Van Gogh did it, you can do it too. And if it gets just a little bit too wonky, that's okay. All right, that feels better. Now I'm going to take my turquoise and just kind of like roughly color. And look at how that blue plays against the orange and the yellow. When you put two complementary colors next to each other, they play off of each other and kind of activate the other one. And then I'm going to just kind of scribble into some of this a little bit. And also the orange too. Why not?
That's so scary to me.
Oh, look. Have fun. Loose. Playful. If you're not going to give yourself freedom to explore on your own paintings, then trying to mimic what other artists do, like this is an exercise. You know what I mean? Like if you cannot have courage and freedom when you do your exercises, when you try things, then you are going to limit your own progress and ability to learn. So give yourself opportunity to just explore and play. I mean, look at how that blue pops against the yellow. It's so beautiful. You can incorporate it in some of the green here. This flower has actually a blue center. Maybe put some over here. And now I'm just kind of adding it because I love it.
It really does add a ton of depth.
Doesn't it? Just all of a sudden it goes pop. Amazing.
Wait, it goes.
That's such a good pop, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay, and then our very last step here is we are going to go in and try and mix a black. So that's basically just more of the blue and the red and less of the yellow. And then I'm going to take this black and I'm going to put it and outline some of the centers. Some of the sunflowers have these kind of darker centers.
I remember taking a watercolor class, and he was talking about, it was with you actually, in college. And the teacher, I was asking him about mixing a black, and he said, in any reference, any color could be black.
Yes.
And I was just thinking about that turquoisey blue, but like if you had a super blown out picture, and like you could use it as a black.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, it is. I mean, color and painting in general is just so interesting, and it's just, I don't know. I love going over these lessons in these paintings because I want to show you that it doesn't have to be photorealistic or technically perfect to be valuable. And if we can look through history, are those paintings there and are they valid? Absolutely. But also it's not about recreating a photograph to be exactly like the photograph. It is, what are you trying to communicate to this viewer, and what tools do you have to communicate that, and what choices do you make with those tools in order to communicate what you're saying? That's what's interesting. And that's why I love, Van Gogh and looking at these different artists, because that's what they did. What do I want to communicate? What tools do I have? How do I communicate that? And how do I make it mine? So, the very last fact, our fifth sunflower fact, is that for Van Gogh, sunflowers symbolized gratitude.
Love it.
And I thought that was a beautiful way to end. I'm so grateful that you guys took the time out for you. It's really easy to get caught up in what we want to do, and it's really easy to put ourselves on the back burner when there's so many things pushing and pulling us this way. But when you take the time to prioritize your creativity and what you need, one, your life is just like better and it fills you up. When you prioritize your own um, well being, you then have more to give. You can then be more patient and, I don't know, just a better version of yourself. So I just want to make sure that you take the time to pat yourself on the back for taking time out for you. I hope you enjoyed our lesson on Van Gogh and sunflowers, and I hope it gives you some perspective about trying new things and playing and learning. If you need any of these supplies, they can be found at letsmakeart.com, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.